and we'll go ahead and get started. These subcommittees run a little different than the task force. So I just want to thank you all for taking the time to do this, and thanks for your willingness to do this and your enthusiasm, by the way, because you said you wanted to meet pretty routinely, which is great. So really what I was hoping that this would be, I think does everyone know everyone on here? So I think, have you all met Deidre before? Deidre is I think you've all met Candy before. Candy retired, so we have Deidre as my assistant, and she's going to help us with this. Kirby, I think you've met. He's our graduate school intern who's working with us. And Jamil, this is your mother with you.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. Yeah, my name is Naja Robinson.
Well, it's very nice to meet you in person. That's great.
Yeah.
So, well, we thank you for joining us. So look, gang, I want this to be your time. I want this to be your voice. I want you all to express what's on your mind. And we can do this however you want to do it. If you want to just have dialogue among yourselves, that's perfectly fine with me. And if you want to have anyone else attend, like I mentioned in my email, that was not by way of requirement. That was just a suggestion. If you want to hear from anyone, you name it, we'll arrange it. But this is really your time. You tell, excuse me, you tell us how you want this to look going forward. How's that? And you can design this any way you want, and you can change it every meeting if you want. So how's that? Pretty easy.
I think that we should start, like, a good way to start off would be to go around and like kind of say what was like the reason you guys wanted to do this. So for me, I'd say the biggest reason is growing up as an African American in the Dublin School District. I would say I've had like a pretty good experience overall, but there have definitely been times where I've been like racially profiled or things like that. And so I just wanted to join the subcommittee, or just the whole committee overall, as like a way to express that kind of, and see if we could like work towards a solution to help fix like race relations throughout the city of Dublin, or at least in the school district. So I would say that's my reason for wanting to do this.
I did it mostly, as a white student and a white male student. I really haven't experienced any sort of discrimination directly. I know of friends that have had it, but I never really saw it as that big of an issue until over the summer. And I really just joined it to try and learn what my peers were going through and offer my input on maybe how I could come up with a solution to try and alleviate some of the issues.
I guess for me, it's kind of like you, Jamil. Like I had a pretty good experience going through my school life, and I've always been in the Dublin district. But like my sister and I, we live in the same household, but she had a very different experience from me. Like she got like made fun of for her hair and stuff. Like she did not have the best experience, which is really interesting because we're siblings. And then with like the Dear Dublin, Ohio Instagram, when I started seeing like all those posts with students coming up and like saying, like talking about their experiences, I realized like how different my experience was from everybody else and like what my peers are going through. And I really just want to find like some way to like address their problems and, change those things. So.
I think that's really good. To go with what you said, Will, about how you know people that have like experienced things and it didn't really like open, like it wasn't like eye opening to you really until the summer. Like that's something that has been pretty big through me, or like for me, ever since like I entered high school. In ninth grade, I can remember there was a time where I was in a friend group and I was the only African American, or actually only non-white person out of 16 people, and I remember just getting made fun of and name calling. I'm guessing you guys can know the name that I'm talking about just by like half of them at least. And it was just like awful for me. And I didn't have really anyone to go to. And I think like growing up, I just really didn't know how to cope with that because it was really the first thing that like the only incident that's ever happened to me, like the first time. So I felt kind of lost. I didn't really go to my parents even. I kind of just like kept it inside. and I didn't want to go to like any like administrative at the school or anything because I didn't really know if there was anyone that could relate to me. I know at Kaufman there's not the like there's only two. I don't really know how many, but it's a really small amount of African American um, teachers there, and so I didn't, and none of them were like freshman teachers, so I didn't know if I couldn't really like relate with them or go to them and like tell them about this, and so I was just thinking like a big reason for this is maybe in the school district to like better race relations at the younger ages because that's when kids are more open minded and willing to learn about like how to deal with those situations so that when it gets to middle school and high school that like these things don't have to happen to people like younger than me.
So, and as mom, hi guys. Yeah, so when Jamil said he didn't tell anybody, like we did not know for like a few years. The only thing we did know is that he stopped hanging out with like his group of friends. Like, how come you're not hanging out with them anymore? And he just is like, oh, I don't know. It's just kind of, not really. He just didn't really give an answer and just kind of, maybe retreated a little bit. The good thing about it is that's when he really started buckling down with schoolwork. And so, like, it's like, oh, you're taking school really seriously. So that was like a really great outcome of it. But I mean, by the time, a couple years later when he finally shared what happened, it was like really sad. And it was like he didn't want to tell on his friends because they were his friends. They had been like friends. I guess what you were saying is like, elementary school, middle school, you're just like friends. And then it's actually like probably typical teenage stuff because teenagers are just figuring stuff out. So I don't even know if per se it's not per se malicious,
Just like they didn't know really.
but they didn't know it comes across as malicious. So or like as an identity attack. And so for Jamil, I mean, and everybody, I mean, Dublin is such a close knit community. I mean, you do sports together, the parents are together. It's just a very close knit community. I think for kids, when everyone is so close knit like that, you don't want parents to feel weird. So you don't tell the parents because you don't want them to feel weird. And so it just kind of all stays inside. And so maybe you were saying that like as kids, like if there were more open dialogue as little kids, when little kids aren't embarrassed about stuff because everything's just really open and free, then by the time you get to high school, you still have a language to talk about it. Kind of like the sex education thing. Like you talk about it younger in 5th grade so that by the time you get to 10th grade, you're already increasingly having a dialogue for it that makes it easy to have that conversation instead of hard to have that conversation. And that makes it, not that you're quote like ratting out your friends or anything, but you're trying to like bring about like knowledge and reconciliation. And so I think maybe that I would listen in on some of the larger group conversations. And when Kofi, is that his name? Kofi was talking about how some kids experience and then they don't want to come back. I talked to some other parents, and I think those are some of the things that happen. And it's a common experience that, at least for African American parents in Dublin, they don't know these things until after their kids graduate almost. Like we learn maybe
Entering 11th
late,
grade.
probably 11th grade, probably right before everything that happened this summer kind of time frame. But a lot of parents like they don't know these things that happen to their kids until after their kids are older, maybe went to college, and then they have like they feel more comfortable talking about it. So it's like how do we address it then so kids don't feel alone? And I think from the white kids perspective, so when Jamil said it was like half the kids in the larger group, like some of the kids also felt super uncomfortable, like that's not cool, that's not cool. But then other kids are like, whatever, and again, just kids being kids, but it makes it so that even the kids who maybe want to advocate and say, no, that's not cool, like, because it's just regular teenage peer pressure. So it's just like, how do you help in those scenarios, even when white kids feel uncomfortable with it, if they happen to be a kid who's in a situation where they witness it for themselves too. So it is also one of those things, to be honest, when you say that even like some of the kids have circled back around since then because they're older now, they're more mature and have apologized.
That's true.
Like as they've matured, they are very aware too. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it
Mhm.
was very isolating for a
Oh
season for
wow,
you.
yeah. And I just like how she said they came back to apologize because they knew about it. I think that if we started the knowing about it process earlier, like things like this wouldn't happen. So
I think that's the big issue is that, I've known people and I've known white friends that I've heard of them doing this kind of stuff, and they just don't know what the effect they have because they think it's a joke. They don't take it seriously, and so they don't necessarily see the effect. And I think if they knew that effect that it was having on African American kids, they wouldn't. They would be much less quick to do it, or they would, it would make them pause before they would do it, and hopefully it would decrease the frequency of it happening. And so I think the big key is going to be educating the entire student body and the entire community that these things are happening. And I do think the Dear Dublin page was a good start with that, but I don't think it necessarily reached everyone. And I don't know if it necessarily reached the right people. I don't, it could have, it's one thing for people that are discriminated against to share their stories with other people that are discriminated against, because that's, then you can have support from people that know the experience. But to share those stories with people that are completely oblivious and ignorant to what's going on, that's how I think you're really going to see the real change. And I honestly don't have a great idea on how we're going to do that, but I think that's something we should work towards, is how to get those stories into the people that are ignorant to what's going on's ears.
Um, my mom and I talked about this earlier this week, but I don't know how closely this like committee is to like this the like city or like the school board or anything like that. But if we could,
Dr. Holy.
yeah, that's true. We can get Dr. Hoadley to express this to them. But if we found a way, like I said, in like the kindergarten ages, probably closer to fifth grade, but before middle school or even sixth grade, but pretty early on to yeah, just get like the race relations down and like kind of like how it's like my mom mentioned how there's like a health club.
Yeah, are you guys still, oops, they froze. See if they come back. There they are. Can you hear us? Can you hear us, Jamil? We can see you talking, but we can't hear you. Try it again.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me now?
There you go. Now you're.
That was crazy.
So, so what we heard last before you froze and went off was about trying to get education at early ages on this topic and about the notion of getting that maybe to the school board or the Dr. Hoadley. And so, I mean, this kind of venue would be fine to have a conversation with him or superintendent down in Hilliard or Hilliard schools, whoever, if you wanted to invite them in for a conversation, I could have both superintendents join us at the same time. I'm sure they would do it. They'd be more than happy to do it. So, you all just let me know if that's what you want to do, and I'll be happy to get them in. I know, Will, you were also talking about maybe inviting someone else into the meeting as well from Hilliard schools.
Yeah, I talked to the Hilliard director of DEI, um, and so we had a good conversation about kind of what Hilliard was trying to do, and she seemed very, very eager to possibly work with us and do more like work within the communities and kind of cross community programs or events. She seemed very eager to help with that. So if there was a time or a meeting that we could figure out when we're actually, right now we're very abstract, but if when we get to the point where it's more concrete and literal things, I think she could be a good resource for us.
Good. And we can still bring the superintendents in. You guys can have a sit down with them as just yourselves with them if that's what you'd like to do. And so whenever you feel you're ready for that after your conversation or what have you, you let me know and I'll get them to your meeting.
I think the superintendents is a really good idea. I don't know if we want to do this next meeting or Will, if you were going to talk with you, the lady that you mentioned before, and then we could do superintendents maybe in 2 meetings. But I think we do need to, I think if we got the superintendents in here, that'd be a really good way to make some sort of progress to see like either they shut us down and be like, yeah, we can't do this, or they say, yeah, we can do this. Then we can go like forth with that.
Is it something like kind of informal? Do all of the schools have the elementary schools have the counselor? Like each school has a counselor, and she like goes around and just talks about different things like bullying, or you know how there are all these different things. Like maybe this becomes like another thing like that, where it's just incorporated into regular conversation, just like you talk about how to have lots of friends and not just one friend, so that if anything happens, you know, you still have a friend group. It's like all of this kind of social health, so to speak, that the kids, I mean, they did that really amazingly at Bailey, and I'm guessing they do that at the other schools.
Mm-hmm.
But if this were like added as something that were just talked about, even if it was just like once a year, one of the rotations once a year, so that each year, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, age appropriately, it was introduced and talked about, then it would kind of normalize it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that sounds like a great idea, like just incorporating it from, elementary school. And so that conversation is ongoing throughout your like primary school years. So then it's something that you get used to and you're like ready for when you go out into the real world. And I did have an idea of like another way that we could like help educate people on like diversity and other cultures. I'm not sure if all the Dublin schools do this, but at Scioto we have a global cafe event every year. And it's pretty awesome. It's like a cultural celebration. So kids will make presentations on their cultures and like make food as samples and like, people can eat the food. We have song and dance, and we also have a fashion show where people can wear like their cultural attire and then like show it off. And I just think it's a really great event that like brings everyone together in like a fun way, but also at the same time, like you're having fun, you're eating this great food, but you're also like learning about other people. And I know that like right now it's probably not that reasonable. I don't think we're gonna have it this year. But like maybe we could do something like for the community or like across the schools and have it like online, have like some virtual aspect to it, because then like everyone can see it online and we're not all together. You know what I mean?
You know, I didn't realize you did that. We tried to do that as a city. We had an event that the Dublin Arts Council did. They tried it 2 years in a row, and it was called the Bread Festival. And it was in historic Dublin. And the idea of the Bread Festival was everyone would come together, just as you're saying, foods, dance, music, fashion, cultural awareness, and try to have this sort of multicultural sort of a celebration in the community. And the first year they did it, there were a lot of people came. It was in October, which is kind of it's a nice time of year because the weather tends to be pretty nice actually in the beginning of October. And I remember the beautiful day. The only problem was competing with the Buckeyes game or something. But they had a huge turnout and a lot of different booths with different cultures and music, and so it was really cool. The second year didn't go quite as well, and then they quit doing it. They didn't have the funding for the third year. We lost them again, but it was very similar trying to do that on a community scale. So it was pretty cool. I loved it myself. My wife and I had a great time. I got a picture of my wife dancing in one of the booths. She had a great time. We'll see if they get back in here. The Robinsons froze on us again. So there you go.
I think we're back now.
Is it
All right.
just
Yeah.
going away? Are we the only ones going away?
You're kind of in and out. We've been able to hear you pretty well when you don't freeze on us. So
Uh-oh.
Yeah. That's
again. Daggone it.
another location.
There
Okay,
you go.
we're about to relocate if you could hear us because the internet here just isn't the best. So we're about to move real quick.
Okay. See how long it takes them to relocate here. It is amazing how you go from one end of your house to the other and have a different signal. So, Audrey, when's the last time they did that at Soda? Last year when school was in? Well, school wasn't in last year, was it? So,
I think last year was canceled because it's a spring event. That's when we normally do it. So I think it would have been like right after we went online. But I know we did it my first 2 years, so sophomore and freshman. And it was a huge success. I think part of the reason a lot of the kids go is because like teachers will do like extra credit assignments too. Like if you go and you listen to presentations and take notes and stuff, then you can get some extra credit. But yeah, a lot of kids do performances. I'm part of our Irish fiddle group at our school, and so we perform as like an opening thing every year. So that's a fun way to like kick off the event because we're the Irish. So
Irish fiddle group? Really? I didn't know that. That's
we
pretty
do. It's called Irish Fiddle Fetish, and we aren't like I don't think we are like a school club really, but it's like headed by our orchestra director, and we'll like perform gigs. We've gone to like retirement homes. We perform at Irish Festival every year. Um, and then we also take a trip to Ireland like every 3 years and perform there. My sister went on that last trip, but the next trip was supposed to be this year, so still up in the air.
Wow. Well, you don't do all that Irish stuff down in Hilliard schools, do you?
No, we don't do any of the Irish stuff in Hilliard.
I was just checking. I just thought I'd check. All right. Well, while they're coming back, you guys got any other ideas or thoughts?
I mean, I just wrote down some thoughts that like connected to the guiding questions that were in like the initial email. So one of the questions was like, what can Dublin do to ensure that youth needs are addressed? And I'm not exactly sure, but I was thinking that like a main thing would just be like to listen to what the kids have to say. Like what we're doing now, kind of having a youth committee is really important. But since there's only a few of us, like I can't speak for everyone because my experience was not like everybody else's. So maybe like like the Dear Dublin, Ohio Instagram was an example of kids sharing their voices and maybe like conducting polls or like just reaching out to the students more to get their feedback on like what they enjoy about the school, like what they think needs to be changed, things like that. And that'll be different for every school too, because I know it's not the same for every school.
Well, Robinsons, you have a beautiful home because we're getting a tour of your house. So I just
We're trying out here.
He's trying a different device. I think it's his Chromebook. I'm like, what's
okay. Well, where we left off before you all dropped off, we were talking about that the bread festival I mentioned that the community did. I don't know if you heard that. It was similar to what Audrey said they were doing at Soda High School. which is pretty cool. Those are kind of great ideas. What kind of event-based things could we do as well, in the community or in the schools, or a combination of the two, to try to educate and heighten awareness as well. So, those themes carry over from the school into community events. And then Audrey mentioned while we were waiting that just sort of trying to respond to some of the guiding questions was just listening to what kids have to say, and maybe there's some surveying techniques and things like that. But I'll ask all of you. And I know Todd Hoadley has this, and I'm not sure if Hilliard does this, where they have well, I'm sure they do. You have student like councils or advisory committees to either a principal or to the superintendent. I don't know if there's a way to expand that a little bit to try to tap into those groups, because Audrey said, well, we've got this youth group, but she may not be able to represent all the concerns of other youth in the community. So what is the best way to get to? I trust what you all have to tell me. I'll run with that, but which is why I asked you to be part of it. But I also understand too, there's a larger group out there. So maybe a little discussion around that.
I can tell you what Hilliard does. So they have Hilliard City Schools itself has a task force very similar to our larger task force, but it's just focused on the schools. And each school has a student representative, much like we do. But what they do is within each school is there's a group of, I think that she said 12, 15 students. And then they all meet individually. And then their student representatives kind of will then go represent them at the larger meeting. So I think that's something we could explore. And that way we could get a larger sample size within the schools and within the students. So I think that could be a efficient way of, as opposed to just polling. I think if you just poll people, then you might not get the full story, because then you have to ask the exact right questions, and then that's a lot trickier than just asking people and having them tell you directly what they want or what they think is right. And so I think that could be something we could explore.
I think that's a good idea, and I know Audrey and I both serve on Dr. Hoadley's Superintendent Advisory Committee, and I think I don't know how many more meetings we have this year with him, given COVID and everything, but we could bring up kind of what you said and how years moving on, since we're seniors and graduating away from this committee, we can tell the juniors and sophomores and freshmen to try to incorporate a way to get like you said, other students' voices and stories out, and then to the superintendent, and then maybe he can get that out through the community. But because mostly what the superintendent advisory committee does, we don't really go to the other students, and I think if we incorporated a way for us 24 students to get out to the other students of our grade and of our school, and then get it back to him, that'd be a pretty good start to get everything out.
Like maybe if you meet with Dr. Hoadley, if the student representatives like you and Aubrey meet with Dr. Hoadley once every other month, then on the off month, you are responsible for having an in-school meeting that's open for anybody to come to. And so on the off month, you meet with the Kaufman representatives will meet with Kaufman students, and Scioto would do the same, and Jerome. And then on the on months, when you come back, you would give a student report out about what's going on, and include that just as one of the topics if there's things. Yeah.
I think
extend it
that would be a good way to start. Is that kind of what you guys do, Will and Hilliard?
I think so. I'm actually not involved, and I didn't even know that this was going on until I spoke with Mrs. Chapman. But I think that's similar to what they do, or what we do.
Okay, sounds good. Then yeah, I think next meeting, Audrey, we should tell Dr. Hoadley about this and get that out to him. I wanted to mention the cultural day that you guys have at Scioto. Kaufman also does that, and so I don't know if Jerome does it, but I can reach out and see if they do it, and if so, maybe after COVID, we could find a way to get all three of the just the school district to have a giant day, kind of what you were saying, Mr. McDaniel, but through the school district, and then maybe it'll be just a giant event, and it would be a bigger way to express the like each of those cultures and foods and everything like that through like a giant district event. Kind of like how we have the dodgeball tournament, but and then like the whole community comes together for that. We could have something maybe similar to that where the whole community comes together for like a cultural day also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that idea, and that's part of the reason why I loved when Mr. McDaniel was talking about like the bread fest kind of thing. It's like the same reason that everybody likes Irish Fest so much, except that's just Irish culture, but because it's like a celebration of music and there's food and it brings everyone together. So maybe we could do something similar, but it's like exploring all sorts of cultures.
Ms. McDaniel, can you tell me, we probably missed this part, why did it end up failing? Like you said, it worked for 2 years. Was it COVID that cut it off, or was it something else?
No, it was really sponsored by the Dublin Arts Council, and they did a fabulous job. The first year was really popular. A lot of people came out. The second year it didn't go so well, and then they were trying to raise funding for it and everything, and some of the funding just kind of fell out from under it. Although the city funded the first two really, but it didn't really become self-funding, which isn't necessarily a requirement to do something like this. I mean, if we feel like it's something we really want to perpetuate, and we'll find a way to figure it out. And even like Jamil was recommending or thinking about, if you do it kind of like all the schools did it at the same time, then maybe it's a joint thing between the schools and the city that we do together as a possibility. And, we could reach out to down to Dr. Marshausen down at Hilliard, and we'll make sure that Hilliard schools that are in Dublin feel very much a part of it as well. And and actually, speaking of that, as they were talking about that, it's kind of easy to coordinate Dublin city school stuff. But how might we be able to reach into Hilliard? Because and obviously too, Dublin schools is much bigger than the city of Dublin, and so now you're talking about a community event, which is a wonderful, beautiful thing to do, and it goes across boundaries, which I think is great. But how do we do that in a way that makes sure Hilliard schools are involved, and those residents, that are in Hilliard's Dublin residents in Hilliard City Schools feel like they're and are in fact a part of it as well?
This may be kind of a weird idea, but I know that Dublin and Hilliard always have like a giant rivalry. So maybe if we made it like a competition, like the school districts do like a competition, kind of like a cultural competition maybe, and then like the winner, I don't know, win something. We would have to figure it out later, but if we make it like a competition, I know that a lot of even like athletes and people that you would think that like, oh, maybe they wouldn't go to this, but since it's a competition and it's against Hilliard, like they'll join in and like so that way it'll like get a bigger voice. Maybe I don't know if that's
like a
idea.
healthy competition.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that how it works around here, Will? If it's against Hilliard, we're all in, right? So is that how it works?
Yeah, I'd say if it's against Dublin, we're all in.
As a fellow Hilliard boy, I can attest to that. Will is correct.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Kirby grew up in Hilliard, so. Well, I think it's more about that Miami Dolphin pennant you got hanging over your head. That's more the issue, Will, than anything else. But
Yeah.
No, these are great ideas, guys. They're great ideas. And this is the kind of thinking that we need. And I know some of this is big. The big strategic ideas, the big aspirational kind of ideas or goals, but that's how things happen. You have the big ideas, and then we'll figure out how to do it later. We'll get the resources and the people, and we'll perpetuate the dialogue about it and try to figure out how to put these things into play. And sometimes you'll find that, well, we're kind of already doing this stuff, and it's not really that hard to pull off a bigger effort or a coordinated effort, because we find out, oh, I didn't know you were doing that too. We could all be doing it at the same time and getting more out there. So that's always an option as well.
I have another question. It's also for Mr. McDaniel, but also for the kids. Like, what do you think it is about this summer that made it more like hit the hearts of people? such that we even have a committee like this? And like, how do we tap into whatever it is that tapped into the heart? Because I think those are the things that make people either participate or take notice, or so that it's not just the preaching to the choir kind of things. But yeah, when there's like optional things versus mandatory, you can't really make a lot of things mandatory. Like, you have to be really, really strategic about what's mandatory. I guess that's maybe a little bit of how you can reach the elementary kids, if it's just part of a circuit of the counselor going around and doing kind of the health and wellness check-ins or whatever. But it does get really hard to do that. I think another thing that was pretty good is, I'm going two different things. So one is, what do you think it is about this summer, and like, how do we keep connected to the heart of the matter? And the other thing was that could answer the question about what we could do. Remember, Mr. Dan, you might have participated in those like Sunday conversations, or they're like conversations where different people from the community came together and would have like a meal and would just kind of talk. Like, to even extend that so that it can be done in different levels, like at the community level, at the high school level. Like, maybe if once a month each kid were invited. I used to be on staff at a Vineyard Columbus church, and so it's a pretty big church, and the senior pastor, like once a year, the 200 people on staff would have been individually selected, and maybe 12 people would meet with the senior pastor, and you just kind of talk, and he'd get to know you and you get to know him. And if those kind of Sunday conversations happen once a month, and people got their invitations, like kids from all the different grades, and the principal of the building were at each one, and it was just kind of focused conversations, but also everyone around the table gets to kind of share. Like, that could be a neat thing too. And maybe it only happens once in your 4 years. Maybe you don't actually have one every year you're there. I don't know what the details of that look like, but I feel like those were very informative and helps you to like see people's stories. And then when you see people's stories, you have compassion for people. And it talked about everything from LGBTQ, race, religion, gender. It was just kind of like diversity at large.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I think where we were not able to get the momentum off of the emotion that happened in the summer was because of COVID, and we've not been able to bring people together as fully as we would like to have in this situation. Because I think what we would have easily done, if not for the pandemic, is we would have been having a series of town halls. We would have been asking people to come together, and we would have tried to, I don't mean this, don't take this the wrong way, but we would have tried to perpetuate the emotional high while people were, wanting to see change and really try to push that. So about the only way we could really grasp it in the moment was to get a task force together where we could at least bring people in, somewhat, and see if we couldn't, build off of that. So, not as quickly as we would have liked, but we did finally get it together. And so, but still, I still think that is something that can really happen. And that's why really now focusing on sort of big guidance, big goals, big aspirations, guidelines, sort of guideposts. And if that such a suggestion is, we should continue to do Sunday dinners for conversation, or multicultural engagements, or town halls, or cultural celebrations, or these kinds of things, I think are the big ideas that we need to do now while we can't be together, so that when we can be together, we at least have an action plan, to try to do so. Any and all of those ideas are great, and to try to do that. So, but yeah, I don't mean to make excuses, but I think I would have loved to have, and again, having been down there and participated in the protests in historic Dublin when they occurred, it was these guys, it was the youth of the community that was doing it with the support of parents and teachers. That's who showed up down there. by the couple hundred. And I would tell you, it was one of the most, for me, probably one of the more, and I have 35 years of military experience too, and in very diverse settings and with my soldiers and everything. And I will tell you, I never had that experience moved me more than any other I'd ever been in. I've been all around the world, with different cultures and the like, and that was probably the most moving experience I personally ever had. And to see our youth down there doing this was incredible. And so I think it's these guys right here that make the difference, the biggest difference at the end of the day. And that's why I love the idea of really trying to do things at the youngest level is where I think the future lies, right? But that doesn't mean we don't approach it at every level, at everything we can do, every age. Sorry to me to give a speech. That's a great concept that you're talking about, and that's the kind of thing we want to try to perpetuate. So.
If I could just hop in here as well, Mrs. Robinson, those are great points. I serve as the staff liaison for the Education and Communications Subcommittee of the Diversity Task Force, and I'm fortunate enough to have these three bright minds on that subcommittee. And that's actually one of the issues we've been tossing around is how can we set up a speaker series? How can we set up implicit bias training, microaggression training? And I would ask the three of you in our next meeting, bring forward, what we've talked about today in the youth subcommittee and focus on how we can target the youth in those activities as a specific stakeholder group with specific issues within the community. I think those trainings and those speaker series would be a great opportunity to accomplish some of the goals we're talking about today.
So I think what I heard is another meeting or two out. You'd like me to have the superintendents here?
I would think that would be a good idea. Well, do you want to? I forget the name of the lady that you mentioned before, but would you like to talk to her before or after we talk with the superintendents?
I think after might be a little more beneficial because I think the superintendents could help us maybe get some more broad ideas, whereas she can help us, I think, with the execution of those ideas.
Okay, so then probably next meeting, do you know if you can get the superintendents in here for us, Mr. McDaniel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll see if we can get their calendars aligned to be on the meeting.
Okay, I think that.
And I do know Superintendent Marchhausen as well. I've met with him a couple times, so we know each other, and I feel comfortable reaching out to him as well as Dr. Hoadley. So we'll get them here. Let me ask you another one. We're on that topic. Do you see any value in talking to Chief Pice, our police chief, or any concerns or opportunities you see there and talking to him? He's got kids in the high school, by the way, if you don't know him. He's got twin kids, and I think over at Salida. Yeah, so.
Do we have a new police chief from like a year or two? Is he like new? Okay, yes, I saw.
Yeah, he's pretty new. He's been with us. He's been with Dublin for about 15 years. He was one of our sergeants. He came here from Perrysburg and then grew up a lot in our department. Was a sergeant, was a lieutenant, and then I appointed him as chief. So he's raised his kids in Dublin schools and has a long history with Dublin and Dublin schools as well. So
yeah. The reason I was asking if he was new is because at one of those Sunday dinners we talked to the police chief, but I think it might have been the other police chief, the prior.
Was Heinz von Eckertsburg, who was our previous chief. In fact, I remember I was at that dinner as well.
Okay. Yes, and it was great conversation. He was very kind. But we were talking to him because even with respect, and maybe the police, because there's another task force, right? That he's leading up. Right.
We established a Chiefs Advisory Committee so that he could have, he could have a sort of an advisory committee working alongside him for some feedback and on policies and processes. And he did a lot of this engaging the community, but it gave him a more focus group that he could have as an advisor. We have lots of advisory committees with the city, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
no, but it's a really important one. It's brand new and very important mission that they have. Yeah.
Yeah. That I think it would be great to have him hear from you guys. I don't know if you guys really speak up too much when he's, but yeah, to share. I mean, that is another one of the areas where, like, even Jamil has been pulled. Well, he wasn't really pulled over because he was only 14, so he wasn't driving. But his big sister, who was 17, was driving, and it was like when there was a big incident, and it was like, a wrong identity thing, but it kind of scared them. So it was like, in a sense, they were like followed from here to the dentist office, from home, the home neighborhood, to the dentist office. And it was pretty scary. Jamil was the passenger, and I was meeting them at the dentist office, and he's like, "Mom, the police are following us." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And so I talked to the police chief after. I mean, nothing ended up happening, and I was there. I was there before they got there, and the police got there with them, and so we were able to talk it through. But it was very scary. It was a scary thing for the whole Dublin community. It was when there was that break-in in the next neighborhood over, and they were looking for an African-American male. But I think they were looking for like a guy who was like a bearded, darker skinned guy, and like Jamil was light skinned. He already has a baby face at 17. So imagine when it was like 14. He was 14 when this happened. And it was just pretty scary, but I appreciate the conversation with the police, the then police chief, when I just happened to have the chance to say, "Oh yeah, this is something that happened." But that is another one of those things when, as I talk to some other African American parents, that most of their kids their sons have been pulled over at some point or another, and it's just like, wow, like even in Dublin, because I mean, we even experienced the Dublin bubble too. Like I feel like we as Black people experienced the Dublin bubble, but even in that, that's like a common experience, and which can be pretty scary again. And
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Justin, Chief Price, would be more than happy to hear about that and/or discuss it. And any thoughts, concerns. I really love the opportunity for him to have some one-on-one time with this group, if you will, in a small setting, and just be able to have a conversation and address any thoughts that you all might have, or things you're hearing about, or concerns you hear from other kids and, young people. I'm an old guy, so I call you kids. I'm sorry. I've got daughters about your age. So, but anyway, so, that's, I think it's important. And I know he would appreciate it, but again, I don't want to push anything on you that you don't want to do or you're not comfortable with. But I'm sure he would relish the opportunity to spend some time with you. We'll get him set up for another couple meetings down the road.
I think that's a good idea. So thank you.
Well, you first of all, anything else you want to raise that's on your mind, or things you think we don't have to have all the answers tonight. We're gonna have a few more meetings. So other thoughts?
So I have a quick question. I know, Mr. McDaniel, you said that you have a meeting every Monday around this time, but I was just wondering, because I know with track and field, our practices got pushed back to 4 p.m. And so it might conflict with the 5 p.m. calls that we have like every Monday. So I was wondering if maybe we could push that back to a different time.
Hey, we're here to support you. So whatever you all need, and this is about your conversation. I don't really want to, and I know I talk a lot. I try not to. I don't want to, in any way get in the way of your conversation. We'll do the setup. We'll make it happen. We've got Deidre's going to make sure everybody's connected up. Between Kirby and I and Deidre, we'll tag team because we have to keep minutes of this meeting. So we'll do that and make sure that happens. And I have council meetings on Monday nights, like every other Monday night. So like I'm getting ready to jump on an executive session with council here in about 5 minutes. So sometimes I get bumped up against, but if you all need to push back a little bit further, every other Monday night I'm good. It's just, every other Monday night I'm not. But it's not about me. It's about you all. So whatever works for you, we will accommodate. So yeah, I by no means want to plan this around me. So
Okay. Thank
I did
you.
the first one because I wanted you to hear from me what it is we want to try to support and help you achieve. So
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I can get back to you guys later about that just to get the timing correct. But yeah,
Okay.
I think appreciate it. So thank you.
all right, well, if you have that adjustment, Audrey, Will, how is that bumping up against any standing thing you have going on a Monday evening?
I mean, that should be fine. I also do track, and we do it right after school, and it normally ends around like 5:30. But like for distance runners, sometimes it's a little later than that, so that would work just fine for me.
Yeah, that's good. I think I'm really good anytime after 5:30.
Okay.
Do you want to try 5:30 for next week and see how that works? And if it's still cutting it close, we can push back even further, or we can do 5:45 if you're not getting out until 5:30.
I think 5:45 would be a safe bet.
Want to
And
try
then
that?
work, we could push it back, but I think that should be pretty good.
Jamil, we just know your bedtime's 7, so we want to make
Yeah, push it a little close on the back end. So
So I'm teasing you. Wouldn't be fun if I couldn't give you a hard time. Okay, so all right. Well, again, whatever meets your all's needs, that's what we'll do. And if even you needed to jump to a different evening of the week, off and on, it's whatever you need. That's what we're here for. So great. Okay, so you'll send us an email. We'll make sure it gets distributed. We'll include Sammy. She couldn't be here tonight, so we'll see how that works for her as well. Is that okay? Good. All right. Okay. Anything else you want to questions, thoughts for tonight? This is the most productive hour I've had in like most of my life, so this is great. Well, I appreciate everyone's passion about this and your willingness to participate, and we'll make some great things happen. You know what? I said in my email, I'll say it again. You have the opportunity here to set a great direction for our city well into the future. So no pressure, but pressure's on. Okay, terrific. All right, then. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll close our subcommittee meeting and we'll see you next week. How's that? Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Bye.